there was a Jewish rabbi and a Catholic priest, and they were meeting at the town's annual 4th of July picnic. And as they were old friends, they began their normal banter, and the priest was teasing the rabbi, and he said, "This baked ham is just delicious. You really ought to try it. I know you'd like it. I know it's against your religion, but I can't understand why such a wonderful food can't be kosher. Why it would be forbidden. You don't know what you're missing. You haven't lived until you try Mrs. Smith's ham. Tell me, Rabbi, when are you going to break down and try it?" And the rabbi replied, "At your wedding." It's an elderly woman that walked into a country church, and the friendly usher greeted her at the door, and he was helping her in, and he said, "Where would you like to sit?" And she's on the front row, and he said, "Oh, you really don't want to do it. The pastor's really boring." "Do you know who I am?" the woman said. "No, I'm the preacher's mother." He said, "Do you know who I am?" "No." He said, "Good." I've been doing some lessons out of this book, 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. And I know it hasn't seemed like a series because it's been here one week and a couple of weeks go by and we do another lesson and we do another lesson. And like this week, it's hard to remember that all this came out of the same book. One of the reasons I selected the book is because I knew that in the first quarter of the year, our lessons are always a little, there's so many traveling people that come to Florida in January, and we want to take advantage of them. So, at any rate, if it seems disjointed, never fear. Each lesson stands on its own. In today's lesson, which is the 4th out of this book, and it's on two steps. One of the steps is mindfulness, and the other step is about taking action. And there was this elderly woman and her little grandson who were at the zoo, and his face was just sprinkled with bright freckles. And lots of children were in line waiting for a local artist who was painting tiger paws on their cheeks. And the little girl in front of the little boy turned around and said, "You've got so many freckles, there's no place to paint." And embarrassed, the little boy dropped his head, and his grandmother knelt down by him and she said, "I love your freckles. When I was a little girl, I always wanted freckles. Freckles are beautiful." And the little boy looked up and said, "Really?" "Of course," said the grandma. "Just name one thing that's prettier than freckles." And the little boy thought for a moment, and he peered at his grandma's face, and he smiled, and he said, "Wrinkles." And it's a funny little story, but it's a sweet story. Because in that moment, that little boy was totally in the now moment with his grandma. He recognized her love for him, and he wanted to give it back. And I'm sure in that moment that he was reflecting her love back, and I'm sure that those wrinkles were the most beautiful thing he could see. I believe that's what we're talking about in mindfulness, being aware of what's going on in the present moment. Now, it's very interesting to me that this lesson is paired mindfulness and action. But truly, what we're trying to get to is being mindful so that we can take action and be a force for good in this world. It's particularly interesting to me that this lesson shows up this week. Because some of you who've been around this week have not seen me being very mindful. I've really been into action. And it got so that I was so action that people would ask me questions and I would say, I don't know, I can't think anymore. And that's exactly what happened. I was so over-involved that I could no longer see the forest for the trees. In the book, Karen writes that the purpose of mindfulness, one of the practices that took the Buddha to enlightenment, is to help us to detach ourselves from the ego by observing the way our own mind works. It's not the kind of meditation where you sit on a cushion and you stay there in a quiet place. Mindfulness is the kind of meditation that you do wherever you are and during whatever you're doing. In mindfulness, we stand back. We step back and we observe our behavior. I had to step back and see I was no longer being effective. All the while, we're engaged in the normal process of living. Because life doesn't stop, it just keeps on going. By being mindful, by stepping back, by looking at our interactions, we can discover how we're interacting with people and what makes us angry and unhappy, and we can analyze our experiences and we can pay attention to the now moment. With mindfulness, we get to use the new analytical neocortex part of our brain to become more aware so that we can act out of that part of our brain rather than reacting out of our amygdala or the reptilian brain or the old brain. So we live in the moment, observing the way we speak, walk, eat, and think. When being mindful, we look at everything in a non-judgmental way. Beth, when you're mindful, when I'm mindful, I am looking at everything in a non-judgmental way. Beth, when I'm, the lesson is for me this week. It doesn't mean that we don't discriminate or make a decision. We do, but we look at our thoughts and our actions and we see which ones are harmful and which ones are beneficial. We get to stand in life, in the middle of our life with everything going on, and use all of our spiritual principles and all of our spiritual tools to achieve that which is beneficial. Because if we don't do that, those harmful, negative thoughts that bombard us when we're asleep, those habitual things, they just pop right out. And it happens for all of us. I don't think there's anybody in here that is walking on water right now. We all have those times where we're not totally mindful, and we end up saying or doing something that we might not do or say if we were mindful. And it's not that we want to label ourselves good or bad, right or wrong. We just want to see what's helpful and what's not. In mindfulness practice, we look on at ourselves with curiosity and wonder. I wonder if that would have been different if I'd done this. I wonder if I could have said that in a way that wasn't hurtful. In the book Awakening Joy by James Barras, he talks about the story of the little prince. And in the story, the prince is puzzled by the way grown-ups get so caught up in what they consider grand matters of consequence. And guess what? We're them. We're those grown-ups. We're so busy sometimes with what seems urgent that we have no time for what the mathematician in the story calls loafing or balderdash. But we have to stop and question, what is the most important thing in our life? What has real meaning? Is it taking time to play with our kids and our grandkids? Is it quality time with our significant other? Is it the first aroma of coffee in the morning? Or the beauty of the last rose on the vine? Or that sunset? Or about that hug you got when you walked in the door this morning? And the last couple of days have been absolutely beautiful. And yesterday I'd worked on my computer all day long, and then I went over to Maggie's we had a little meeting, and I walked outside and I thought, oh my gosh, this is why I live in Florida. It was absolutely gorgeous. And what happens is, in the fleeting moment, we're once again busy paying bills, reading emails, checking on Facebook, finishing a project. I can't speak for you, but I can speak for me. I've let these matters of consequence distract me from the blessings of life. There's another part of mindfulness, and that is realizing that everything changes. Nothing is permanent. Everything is impermanent. What I find and notice is that my thoughts and my feelings change. One minute I can be worried about writing a talk, and the next minute I can be looking at the sunset. It was a matter of choice. Oh my gosh, who knew? When we become mindful, we notice how our thoughts and our feelings shift back and forth, from here and back. Just noticing that swing allows us to recognize that we don't have to grasp or hold on to anything. And noticing the swing, being aware of it, causes the swing to slow down. The more aware we are in this moment of each other, the less we swing. Knowing that change happens allows us to fully appreciate the good times when they come, without thinking about all the things that have gone wrong in the past. One of my favorite phrases is, "This too shall pass." I have to remember, no matter what it is that I'm dithering about, this too shall pass. One of the lessons I've had to learn here is I never get everything done. And eventually nobody asks for that anymore. You know, you don't get it done, eventually it's too late. And if I can remember that, if I can remember that this experience is temporary, I might be able to let go of suffering sooner. I'm all for that. Have any of you been worried, anxious, dithered about something? Have you dithered, worried, or been anxious about something that didn't come to pass? Did you suffer while you held the thought about it? For those of you who were here last Saturday when we did Byron Katie's work, that question, who would you be if you weren't holding that thought? What does holding that thought do to you? How do you feel when you hold that thought? With mindfulness, we learn to look at what we're thinking about. And I don't know, this may be true for some of you or someone particular that this came to my mind, is that sometimes we begin obsessing over the past. And yes, we can look at the past and we can learn from it, but we have to be compassionate toward ourselves and let go of all the things that we could have done different. We can know that whatever it is that we beat ourselves up about, it's happening to somebody else too. The thing is, my story is your story, and your story is my story. The scenes might be different. Like when you open a book and it says, this really happened, but the characters have been changed. The setting has been changed. That's what's true about you and me, is that we all have the same things going on in our minds in greater or lesser degrees. And that's why we all get to learn together, and we get to learn from each other. You and I get to choose to hang on to the past or let it go. And when we keep having something that comes up over and over, and we choose to attach to it or look at it, we are choosing to suffer. Obsessing over something has never changed it. It's in the past and gone everywhere except in our mind. It's by being mindful of what we're thinking about that we can let it go. The goal is for us to be mindful about our thoughts and our feelings so they can't hijack us and carry us someplace we would rather not be. Being mindful does not let something take up free space in your brain. Doesn't give it free rent. And I love that. We can ask ourselves, do I want to feel bad? Do I want to prolong my suffering? I know that may sound silly, but just think about all the things that you might be doing during a bout of can't find where you put it. Now, we are, I have to say, if you lose something and you need to find it, if you'll come on here at noon on Tuesday and Thursdays, I have some people that will swear that we pray and they go home and find it, what they were looking for. But how much time have you spent looking for something? And then it's not that I can't find it that I'm obsessing about it. It's, now why didn't I look at where I put it? How have I done this again? Anybody else do that? I had dinner the other night with a lady who is experiencing some memory challenges. And she knows that. And she looked at me and she said, well, one good part of it is there's so much stuff I don't have to worry about anymore. Dr. Richard Davidson, in the book, The Emotional Life of Your Brain, has conducted research studies on mindfulness-based stress reduction. And here's what he says. The more our thoughts travel along the path of less anxiety, the greater our resilience and the more positive our outlook, which makes it easier for thoughts and feelings to continue taking this new route in our brains. Less stress equals more happiness. Would any of you complain about having more happiness in your life? No. Truthfully, this mindfulness practice, it's really part of what we teach in Be Peace, that part that we learn about heart math. It's a mindfulness practice. So if you haven't taken Be Peace, this is another place to get one of those tools that you can use. The author suggests that we try being mindful whenever the phone rings, to stop and look where we are, what we're doing. When we're eating, when we're waiting in line, when you're driving. I'm hoping that I'm mindful when I'm driving. But how do I know that I'm not always? because I get there and don't remember the trip. Any of you ever done that? All of a sudden you're home and, oh my gosh, I just left. When you're out on a walk. I have a handout, and I hope that all of you got it. It's called the Now Toolbox, and it is 10 ways that you can become, practices and ways to become more mindful in your life. And what I would suggest is that if you're real interested, you look up Nancy Collier. She's written a book about the monkey and the brain. And I took this toolbox directly from an article she wrote in Psychology Today. So it's got her name on the top. So I do want to give her credit for it, but the practices here are very good, and they're things that you can read about and you can use in your life. There was an 8-year-old who was asked, if you knew how someone else felt, would you be more likely to help them than if you didn't? And this is what the little boy replied. He said, oh yes, what you do is you forget everything else that's in your head, and then you make your mind into their mind. Wow. Then you know how they're feeling, so you know how to help them. It's pretty profound for an 8-year-old. Pretty amazing. It's time. I've run out of time. I haven't run out of pages. That's like run out of money, but still have checks. So the idea is for us to become mindful so that we can go out in our lives and take action. Karen invites us to 3 daily actions. 1, make a resolution to act once every day in accordance with the positive version of the golden rule. Treat others as you wish to be treated yourself. 2, resolve each day to fulfill the negative part of the golden rule. Do not do to others what you would not like them to do to you. And make an effort once a day to change your thought patterns. If you find yourself indulging in a bout of anger or self-pity, try to channel all that negative energy into a more kindly direction. And if you have discovered at the end of the day that you did not do these 3 actions, she says, have compassion on yourself, smile wryly at your omission, and resolve to do better tomorrow. Then tomorrow, do all 3. Then the next day, start doubling the efforts for each one. Then the days after that, go for 3 times, and on it goes. The goal is all day, every day. And her last sentence is, and by that time, of course, you will become a sage. Become a sage. Thank you.